Hi, and welcome to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Uhler. I'm Brad Wilder. Today on the show, another very special guest at a topic that seems to be on a lot of parents' minds, gender dysphoria. Jon Uhler and Dr. Ann Gillies are here to help unmask it all. John, thanks again for being here. I know your time is limited. Let's give everyone at home a chance to understand what rapid onset gender dysphoria is before we chat with Dr. Ann Gillies.
Brad, thank you for allowing us to approach this subject. This is really the basis of the trans movement in a way, as far as what parents have now had to encounter. Rapid onset gender dysphoria was a term that was used to describe this, really what amounts to a tidal wave, a tsunami that has taken the world by storm, the Western world by storm, as far as these kids that are announcing they don't want to be their gender or their sex. Here on the program, we really don't get hung up on that too much. Why? Because you have boys and girls, men and women. You have X and X chromosomes and X and Y chromosomes. It does not help children who are confused to push a delusion. If you tell a child who has mental health issues that they are the opposite sex or gender, you are going to confuse them even more, and you can consign them to a lifetime of difficulty. We are all about protecting children and kids as well as women, and it does not protect someone to affirm a delusion. So we are all about truth here. We're all about unmasking what has been sold to these kids. So rapid onset gender dysphoria is really what has amounted to the term social contagion. This thing has been contrived, it has been sold, and it has been pushed. What is this thing? The idea that kids can be born in the wrong body. I know of no one better than Dr. Ann Gillies. I am so privileged to have Ann back with us. She is from Canadian. She is a fellow therapist and a fellow clinical trauma professional, as I am. And she has written, she's an author, she's a speaker, and she has been really sounding the alarm for parents to understand this whole issue of social contagion, rapid onset gender dysphoria. These kids, Ann, are confused, and it sets them up to be exploited and preyed upon both financially and sexually by predators. Ann, welcome again to the program, and talk to us about your concern about rapid onset gender dysphoria.
Well, thank you again. Yeah, I've been concerned for a lot of years. In fact, I have written about that. So I am going to read a couple portions, sentences from this book, Closing the Floodgates. Chapter 7 is all about gender dysphoria and the transgender movement. So I wrote this in 2016, published in 2017, but listen to what Dr. William Brennan says in his book, Dehumanizing the Vulnerable. He says the power of language to color one's view of reality is profound. So the first thing we have to do is understand the language out there that has been conscripted and forced upon us as a populace. And so that we now must adhere to this language. And so we've transferred onto sex, gender. And let me read this too, because I think this goes directly to what you're saying. So gender dysphoria is described as the distress a person feels. Listen to this, it's a quote. Because of their sex and gender, they were assigned at birth. So there's a whole language, a new language, a new way to speak about things. Assigned at birth means now that doctors do not and should not, and they are told not to categorize male and female. They are told to suggest, or they say, well, this is the female as assigned at birth, meaning that this may not really be a female. and she may decide to be a boy later on. We have such corruption happening, right? And so that's a real issue. So gender dysphoria, so gender has replaced the word sex, and almost universally on all of our documents, right across the board, like medical documents, legal documents, gender is in everything, not sex anymore. It doesn't say what sex are you, it says what gender. So this
and that is such a crucial point, what you're making right now. And I really want you to elaborate on that, because if people don't understand what you have just said, because the trans movement, I call it the trans deception,
Yep.
implements and employs some of the most profoundly successful techniques that are drawn right out of cults as far as mental and emotional manipulation. We used to call it brainwashing, but some people take issue with that. So we'll say mental and emotional issue. This movement is contrived, it is man-made, and therefore it is intended to capture hearts and minds, and you do that exactly as you're saying, through language. Say that again, so that, and as a matter of fact, reference some of the other terms so that when parents, grandparents, other good people hear some of these terms, they know that these are not real terms. These are contrived. Somebody spent time crafting the language so they can capture hearts and minds so that nobody questions this narrative.
Right. So what has happened, and you're absolutely right, John, the academic world, the humanities, particularly psychology specifically, has been reconstructing language for a long time. So they started with the academics to begin to, have this whole language rolled out regarding the LGBTQ and especially the transgender. So what I was saying there was that gender dysphoria is the distress a person feels because of their sex or gender that they were assigned at birth. We are putting thoughts into people's minds. So we have doctors now, and this is very true, that they're hesitant because they could lose their license if they don't conform to these ideologies. So a doctor saying, you have a little girl, doesn't want to do that anymore. So I'm assigning this sex as a girl. I'm assigning. No. The doctor doesn't get to assign, hello, boy or girl, male or female. They're assigned biologically at conception. But you see, the language is so skewed. And gender and gender dysphoria is a subjective or personal experience or thought. It starts as a thought in the mind. I don't think I'm comfortable with my sex today. I don't think I'm comfortable being a girl. And if that thought plays around in the child's mind, and it will in our education system, because they're trained, the children, and talk about confusing the language. What's happening in our schools is children understand this new language because they're taught from kindergarten up all of the terms, and parents are left going, what the heck is that? I've come across some new stuff recently, and I'm thinking, I never knew that. And I thought I was really educated in this.
They're always changing the language. And what you just clarified then sets the stage for, as far as somebody comprehending how they are targeting these kids. And that's exactly what's going on. So you have girls that are starting to go through puberty.
Yes.
Girls that unfortunately have, as virtually all young people nowadays, they're coming across stuff online. They're coming across pornography. The media is saturated with what females should look like. No kid can, it's all airbrushed. So historically, everybody understands the difficulty of going through puberty. We all remember what that was like. So you have girls that feel awkward, girls that are comparing themselves, and all of a sudden, you have this idea introduced that maybe if you don't feel comfortable with what you see on the TV or what is pushed as the acceptable female appearance, that maybe you really aren't a female. We used to call them tomboys. And,
yeah, maybe you really are a boy,
right? It's girls that happen to enjoy all sorts of activities. As far as, climbing trees and playing sports. So if ever there was going to be a gender or a sex, again, I'm not going to get hung up on it, right? Because you have XX or XY chromosomes. But if ever there was going to be a sex that or a gender that said, I don't feel comfortable, historically it was boys. And boys then possibly would transition, but it was less, 0.000 whatever
I have
percent.
stats.
But now this massive onslaught of girls saying they don't feel comfortable in their body. Maybe they were born in the wrong body, and therefore opportunistic special interests are more than happy to get them onto what amounts to a moving sidewalk, and they're now going to move towards what's being called the transitioning. Parents need to understand that term. To transition a child is to set the trajectory toward sex change medicalization, what used to be called sex change surgeries. So, Anne, speak to the degree of manipulation, because these kids are going to be sterilized and ultimately amputated.
Oh yeah, it's horrific. Lifelong medication after. So one thing that we should clarify here is that these girls that are coming out, and they're usually early teens or now even earlier, that's called rapid onset gender dysphoria. And so we're boys, it used to be boys, as you said, 85% now who are transitioning are young girls. And so they have decided suddenly, and it is sudden, that's part of this whole rapid onset, suddenly, without any kind of warning, the parents don't have a clue, that they decide they're in the wrong sex. They're born in the wrong body. Even they say they have the wrong brain. This is all part of media campaign. You have the brain you were born with. And guess what? We have 65,000 different chromosomes that depict whether we're female or male. Hello, this is a big deal. So one thing I wanted to share with your listeners, and I think this is pretty important because I have this stat here. So according to the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the Bible for psychologists, in 2013, this is what it said: the prevalence of gender dysphoria for natal males, so born boys, sorry, ranged between 0.005% of boys up to 0.014%. That was the percentage of boys in the entire population in 20.
So, Anne, just in case we lose someone, it's less than 0.5%.
Oh, much less.
Right? So basically, Anne, you and I, we've been doing therapy for years, each in our own right. You never come across it.
Never.
Ever. Never. Suddenly, it's flooding. The floodgates have been opened. Where did all
absolutely good word, because we'll talk about that in the next session. But for girls, it was 0.002 to 0.003%, just minuscule per part of the population, and between 88 and 97% would resolve to their biological leanings, like male and female, but particularly boys, by the time they hit puberty, and now some of them most of those would have had therapy, and it would have been primarily behavioral therapy, which is outlawed now because we have this whole affirmation only mandate law in Canada. We cannot practice behavioral therapy with these children. We can't suggest to them that they might be thinking wrongly, that maybe they've got this wrong. We can't talk to them about or suggest there may be some predisposing illness or issue, some mental illness that's already there. And a large percentage of these children have mental illness issues. And then about 30%, so this is, on top of that, up to 30% are autistic. These are vulnerable children that are being targeted by unscrupulous people who have overtaken academia, and it's poured down into political realms so that now laws are passed, and so that the teachers who once had the best interests of the children in mind are now teaching these concepts and this new language. And so we have created these unhappy and confused children. They're so confused, and the parents have no clue what they're learning, their children are learning. And then they get to be about 7, 8, 9, 10, and they come home one day and say, because it's coming earlier, this social contagion was starting really to push forward from 2010 on has really erupted. And now the age limit has gone down, and we have, 7, 8-year-olds coming home and saying, well, Dad, I'm really a girl and I want you to help me be a girl.
You're being proactive on that now, Dr. Ann, and you've got a lawsuit with your own school board locally. Maybe you want to help the parents out with understanding why and how that came to be.
Well, yeah, I've been speaking out against this for several years. So I did actually present. We get to spend 10 minutes, have a 10-minute presentation to your school board. You have to pre-apply and show them what you're going to talk about and all that stuff. I did present in 2018 my concerns about what they were teaching in the schools about gender dysphoria and the transgendered child. And I was pretty blunt. I gave them lots of statistics, and I said at one point, there will be a time when these children are going to be filing lawsuits, and I've said that publicly many times, that the doctors, the teachers, the psychiatrists, the psychologists, those in authority over children who have been teaching them lies are going to be brought to justice. Now, we may not see that for a while, but I think it's imploding very quickly. So yes, I went. And then the next year I had brand new, really good science on what was happening to these children and the long-term effects that we're seeing. And I mean, now, we're since 2019, even more. But what happened is, so I sent my application in to once again speak to the school board. These are adult trustees. Anyway, so I applied. They refused to allow me to speak. And I'm like, you don't get away with that. Hello, I'm a professional here. The teachers and what you're teaching these children is wrong, and you will not listen to someone raising the alarm.
No, that's where I like to bring up that their bonds need to be taken away, and I think that if they're unbondable, they won't be able to work in the profession anymore. The sooner we get these people away from our children, the happier we're going to be. And that, as a blue-collar worker myself, I believe that all blue-collar people will understand those exact words. It's time to make a change. It's time to make a difference. And the only way to do that is to get to speak and be heard.
Well, and so what I did, because they wouldn't listen to me, I gathered a group of friends who believe what I believe, and we showed up. It was wintertime. It was early spring, but it was cold out. Anyways, we went to the school board office the night of the meeting, and we got a loudspeaker, and I did the presentation outside. And the media didn't even want to touch us. They don't want to talk about this, right? Because then people might think, wow, is there something wrong here? So anyway, then I decided to start a lawsuit against them, which hopefully will be settled. And it's just they don't have any right to allow a parent and grandparent to not speak.
What's your ultimate outcome with this lawsuit? What do you intend on happening at the outcome?
Well, I hope that they will be chastised at some level. And the lawsuit isn't about the trans stuff. It's about me speaking and them refusing to allow me, because that's just absolutely wrong legally. This is our school board. We pay taxes.
Sure, they shut you down because of the topic. They didn't shut you down for any other reason than the topic.
No, the topic. Absolutely. Absolutely. And they want to scare people away. They want to scare people away, and they do not want the parents knowing that that what they're doing is harmful to the children. So, yeah. So we'll see how that all goes. I mean, I want to be able to speak. I want to be able to go there, and I want to be able to tell them over and over and over again what they're doing to these children. And of course, we have a lot more information since 2019.
I would assume that a recommendation for all parents is to pull your kids out of the public school system immediately.
Oh, yeah.
Private schools are going through the same thing. They're another breeding ground for indoctrination just as much as a public school. So don't think your kids are protected that way either. But ultimately, we need to make change. And making change is going to take the efforts of professionals like yourself speaking up, showing that there is a reality here that people aren't living, and you need to start living it and understanding that this has a percentile. Less than 1% of the population is trans, and that confusion isn't necessarily. It shouldn't have become a movement. It's a mental health issue, and I'll stand by that, and I know that you both do as well. So. Continue the learning, continue the education. There is just so much more to get into. Jon, I'm sure you've got some more great questions here. We've got a few more minutes left. What else are you thinking that we need to understand from Dr. Ann here today about gender dysphoria?
I so appreciate, Ann, what you just said as far as the challenge to parents, to grandparents, to all good people. And that's really part of what unmasking the trans movement is all about. We're here to educate and to empower good people to really take back their schools, ultimately to protect their kids. As we say, we're not anti anything here, or there's certain things that we are against. But the best way to understand unmasking the trans movement is we are not anti anything. We are pro protection of children and women. And anything that's going to make it easier, our concern is anything that would make it easier for predators, financial predators or sexual predators, those that would like to exploit our kids, unduly influence our kids. And so you have stepped up. As you said, you challenged the school board. They're pushing back against you. They think that these are their kids. They are not their kids. These are our kids. And there's other special interests, we should call them dark special interests, that benefit. So they're waiting in the wings. Once these kids have been unduly influenced, then they're gender confused. Where do they go? Well, they're going to be sent to mental health professionals that now have either bought into this or have been told that this is real, that biology 101 doesn't exist anymore. And therefore, now they're going to be given a prescription to who? And as we bring this program to a close, set the stage for really what's waiting in the wings, because recently some people, a whistleblower or two, have come forward, and people need to understand that the house of cards of the trans movement is starting to come down. So what's waiting for these kids? And if they get on this conveyor belt, where are they being sent, so to speak?
Well, exactly. They're being sent, of course, to gender clinics, right? So there were no gender clinics in the early 2000s in US. There's now over 100. I mean, this is big pharma. But you know what happens? 2011 Swedish study actually blew the lid open on this, because, of course, the affirmation people say, these children need to go through this process, puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and then medical castration or sex reassignment surgery, and they'll be happy. And what the 2011 study from Sweden showed, that they had, after 10 years after the surgery. They were in worse shape. They had increased mental health issues. Their death by suicide had risen 20%. This does not deal with the dysphoria. It doesn't deal with the issues that are underlying. These children now are incomplete. They aren't male. They're not female. And this is all happening after they thought they had achieved their authentic self, because that's what they're told. You need to be your authentic self. So
these kids are being manipulated by medical professionals.
absolutely.
And let's bring things to a close for this segment. We're going to pick it up on the other side, part 2. You stay right there, and we're going to give an update, really what's going on, that good people have finally, even in the quote unquote industry, are saying enough is enough. They're beginning to see the harm. There's a whistleblower that has just come out that has worked in a medical facility, and basically she can't take it anymore. And she stepped forward saying, we're harming these kids. Stay right there, Ann. We're going to close this program out, and we will pick it up at the beginning of the next program, part 2. Brad?
Thanks, John.
Thank you again.
Yes, we will be back with part 2. There is so much still to come on unmasking the trans movement with Jon Uhler. Gender dysphoria is our topic in show 1. Show 2, we continue with that. Plus, we go a little more in depth with Dr. Ann Gillies. I hope you stay tuned.